I captured a terrifying ghost passenger, but it wants to take me with it. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill swept through me. Not just cold, but a bone-deep freeze. My heart raced, hammering against my ribs as shadows danced in the corners of the room. I wasn't prepared for what lay beyond. My days were usually mundane, filled with the routine hum of my life. Work, coffee, more work. The same old, same old. But that evening, curiosity got the best of me. I saw the door slightly ajar. A whisper of light beckoned me in. The smell of dust and something rotten lingered in the air. It was oddly inviting. I stepped inside. The world shifted. Darkness swallowed the room. I could feel it like fingers trailing down my spine. A soft, creaking sound echoed, as if the house itself was warning me to leave. Instead, I stood frozen, every instinct screaming to run. A shadow flitted across the wall, darting from one corner to the next. I blinked, but it didn't vanish. It felt alive. What was that? My voice trembled, barely a whisper. I strained to listen. A low, muffled whisper curled around my ears, almost familiar. Was it laughter? Fear clawed at my throat. I took a step back, feeling the presence behind me, heavy and suffocating. The air thickened, almost electric. An object moved on the tablia glass, nudged by a force unseen. I gasped, the sound escaping my lips like a plea. My pulse quickened. I wanted to flee, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I was anchored in place, a spectator in my own nightmare. The temperature dropped further, icy tendrils wrapping around my limbs. I swear I could hear breathing, but it wasn't mine. It was shaky, erratic. I turned, a reflex I barely understood, and that's when I saw a figure. Just a silhouette. But it was there, looming with an intensity that sent a fresh wave of terror through me. It reached out, or at least I thought it did. I gasped, the air evacuating my lungs, as silence engulfed everything. Then came the screams, the ear-piercing horror of it, a sound that shattered my thoughts. Something broke. A door slammed somewhere, reverberating through the dark. What did I unleash? What did I invite into my life? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The screams subsided, leaving a deafening silence in their wake. My heart thudded, a wild drumbeat in an eerily still world. Every muscle in my body screamed for movement, yet I remained frozen, the icy fingers of terror gripping me tight. I stole a glance at the silhouette, a thing of impossibility lingering just beyond the edge of the shadows, and an unholy shriek rang out in my window, warning unheeded. With a desperately tethered breath, I took a step back, unintentionally knocking over a chair with a deafening crash. It flew into the darkness, and my skin prickled as I awaited a reaction, anything that would give me an inkling of safety. Instead, a low chuckle resonated from the corner of the room, thick and maleficent. It tore through the darkness, wrapping around my thoughts like a snake. "Stay with me," the voice cooed, dripping with malice and enchantment. I gripped my arms, aware of the tears cascading down my face, a testament to my rising panic. The figure swayed in the shadows, shape-shifting, contorting, a grotesque marionette controlled by sinister strings. I sensed its eyes searching for mine in the looming fog. I could almost feel them boring into my soul. Out of nowhere, whispers filled the room, a cacophony of voices battling for dominance. They clashed and melded, familiar, yet haunting echoes, each more disquieting than the last. "Come closer," lured one voice sweetly. "You belong to us now," sneered another, the very essence of wickedness simmering beneath each word. I was surrounded not just by darkness, but by a chorus of the damned, and oh, I yelled, the refusal escaping my lips like a desperate prayer. I felt hot tears stream down my cheeks as I pivoted, aiming to escape the dreadful sanctum of the unknown. But as I turned, the door slammed shut, the very one I had entered. My breath quickened, and I pressed my back against the wall, fighting against the chill that threatened to consume me. Suddenly, the room seemed to pulse with life. The shadows began to congeal, swirling around like a thick fog, coiling around my ankles and hands, pulling me down. Panic washed over me. I couldn't breathe. Get away from me, I screamed, fighting the pull, desperately clawing at the air in front of me. And then, I saw another figure, materializing from the shadows behind the first. It was ethereal and floating, its body a disjointed mass of pale features, mouth agape in a horrifying scream that emitted no sound, as if trapped between this realm and the next. My throat tightened, terror wedging itself deep inside. This was no mere ghost, it was something far worse that it elongated, reaching toward me with bony fingers that shimmered with a dreadful hunger. You brought us here, you are ours. The room began to warp, the walls pulsating as if exhaling slowly, breathing in tandem with my terror. The temperature plummeted further, and a numbing fog filled my lungs, making it harder to breathe. I felt myself shrinking in on itself, that suffocating labyrinth of despair imprisoning me. Their voices rose to a crescendo, overlapping and bleeding into a surge of insatiable longing, calling forth fragments of my past that I had long buried, echoes of failures, fears, and shadows I had tried desperately to forget. I clasped my hands to my ears, but the sound permeated through, tearing at the seams of my sanity. Just as I feared my spirit would break, an object skittered across the floor. An old picture frame, untouched for years, resting at my feet. I could hardly comprehend how it had come to be there, until the faces slowly became apparent, a family photo, as they once were. But as I looked closer, I realized something horrifying. They were distorted, twisted, eyes vacant and sunken. From the depths of the shadows, unseen, the laughter erupted again, echoing in a spine-chilling harmony with the corrupted smiles of my own ghostly past. Come play with us. In that moment, the floor beneath me cracked, splitting open like the maw of an insatiable beast, beckoning me into its depths. I was on the edge, teetering, and the specter stood behind me, an impassive specter of horror, the embodiment of my past waiting to drag me down into an abyss of despair. No, I screamed, but it felt utterly pointless as cold tendrils latched onto my wrists, anchoring, mepling me. And then, horrifyingly, I felt the grip release. I stumbled back, horrified, and in that frozen instant, I looked up to see the darkness quivering, a new horror flickering within the shadows, and the last thing I remember before everything went black was a brooding, malicious smile approaching. The chilling laughter of my past entangled with the blood-curdling wails of something ancient echoed through the abyss. It came flooding back, the flood of forgotten sorrows. In that fleeting moment, mounted on the precipice of reality, a resonating whisper rang loud and clear. This time, you will join us. And then everything went dark. I awoke with a jolt, gasping for air in an unfamiliar place. My surroundings were a suffocating blackness, broken only by glimmers of erratic light that flickered across unseen surfaces like restless fireflies. A sickening realization weighed heavily upon me. I was not alone in this shrouded void. The silence was oppressive, thick with the echoes of my own frantic heartbeat. Every breath felt like a betrayal. The air was laden with the scent of decay, damp and sweet, stirring an instinctual recoil deep within me. Instinctively, I reached out, only to meet the rough texture of a wall that felt wet against my fingertips. Was I trapped in a tomb? I turned my head, seeking any sign of movement, but the darkness stubbornly held its secrets. That's when I felt a chill laddering down my spine, a delicate caress of dread, the essence of something spectral creeping into my consciousness. In that moment, the air around me shifted, and I was engulfed by the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Who's there? I croaked, the sound of my voice reverberating dully, like coming from the depths of a well. My throat felt raw. Terror laced each syllable. A whisper emerged, coiling around my ears. You should have never come back, it taunted, low and seductive. Hundreds of voices seemed to envelop me, each one overlapping, yet distinct, some filled with loss, others with rage, and some dripping with a chilling anticipation. The cacophony grew as shadows began to coalesce in front of me, shifting into recognizable shapes wreathed in my worst memories. The ghostly forms began to materialize, swirling around me in an ethereal dance. Their faces were contorted in anguish and wrath, mouths gaping in silent screams that left me paralyzed with fear. Among them, I recognized the hollow visage of my mother, her eyes dark voids that swallowed all traces of warmth. Beside her loomed the figure of my father, unshaven and gaunt, as if the very shadows feeding him were siphoning away his will. "Please don't," I pleaded, my voice breaking, scattering into the void like whispers of wind. But they didn't respond. Instead, they advanced, their forms stretching and warping like putty in invisible hands. Suddenly, I felt something brush against my ankle, a cold, slimy mass that retreated quickly, igniting in my mind a primal observance of terror. I stumbled back, only to collide with something solid behind me. The sensation paralyzed my limbs, and a sharp spike of dread lanced through me as tendrils of darkness slivered over my skin, clinging to a pair of glowing eyes emerged from the inky shroud. They pulsated with ancient, unfathomable hunger, and for a moment, time stood still. I was once again that terrified child hiding under the bed, listening to the low growls and relentless whispers of a creature lurking in the dark. "Join us," it beckoned, its voice reverberating through my bones, chilling me to the core. "You always wanted to be with them." The weight of my family's unresolved past surged through me, a flood of emotions threatening to drown me. I saw them all, heard their voices crying out for help, but intermingled were the echoes of my own haunting regrets. Terror clawed at the edges of my sanity, and for an agonizing moment, I felt understanding wash over me. Perhaps I did want to be with them. But then, clarity pierced the chaos like a shard of glass. I could not succumb. Struggling against the onslaught of emotions, I gasped, clutching my head as if to physically ward off their influence. "No!" I screamed, slicing through the spectral cacophony, desperate for clarity. "I will not." The creature's eyes flared in response to my defiance, flash flooding the darkness with malevolence. "You cannot escape your fate," it hissed, inches from my face. "They come for you, as you come for them. You are the missing piece." With that, the ground began to shift beneath me, breaking apart like fractured glass. I tumbled into a chasm, plummeting into an endless void that twisted and warped around my body. Images of my family tore at the edges of my vision. I was losing myself, losing everything, just as I felt them reach for me, every ghostly hand grasping at flesh. I was dragged into a swirling vortex of colors and sound, faces blurring together in a cacophony of laughter and cries. I was being pulled into something much darker than memory, the very essence of despair. And then, a sharp pain pierced the darkness, a whisper so bone-chilling in its clarity that it silenced even the cacophony around me. "We are once more close." Before I could comprehend the significance, agony surged through me, and the last tendrils of consciousness snapped like brittle twine, flinging me violently backward. Shadows engulfed me anew, leaving only a single horrifying truth reverberating through my mind. My family was not just lost. They were waiting for me to join them. And in that shattering moment before true darkness reclaimed me, the shadows melded into one, a wretched void smiling, whispering the eternally haunting words, "Welcome home." When I finally regained consciousness, the dampness of the earth enveloped me like a shroud. I awoke in a grotesque ballroom, the walls adorned with peeling wallpaper that once held vibrancy, now faded to sickly greens and browns. The air was thick, heavy with an unsettling tranquility that made my skin crawl. The flickering lights from before had transformed into a reflection of the dying chandelier that hung precariously above, casting long, warped shadows that twitched and shuddered as though animated by unseen guardians. That I pushed myself upright, my heart pounding as I scanned the cavernous space. Littered around me were remnants of a once grand affair, broken chairs draped with layers of dust, tables set with tarnished cutlery that gleamed ominously in the flickering light. It was as if time had conspired to hold the memories of a celebration hostage, but now I was the only guest left in this wretched gallery of despair. "Is anyone here?" I called out, but my voice stuttered in the oppressive silence, swallowed whole by the haunting echoes of the past. My fingers brushed against my temples, desperate to unwind the fog of confusion. I was pulled from the void, but what of the horrors I just faced? What of the calls of my family? The shadows began to dance, morphing, solidifying into shapes that bounced along the periphery of my vision. Unable to resist, I moved towards a neighboring door, a grotesque temptation, the whispers promising madness and clarity all at once. The door creaked open with a hesitant push, revealing a narrow hallway that lingered in a muted twilight. And then there was a whisper. Soft, sweet like a siren's call, yet filled with an urgency that made my heart race. Help us, it implored, echoing off the walls like a mournful song. Who? My throat felt raw again, but there was something intimate about the plea. Compelled to follow, I stepped deeper into the recesses of the hallway. A chill wrapped around me, seeping into my bones, and I felt the air grow heavier, as if unseen hands were draping a cloak of dread around my shoulders. Each step felt like a surrender. I was swallowed by the silence until a gust of wind whipped through, carrying a bitter scent that pulled my stomach with unease. It was accompanied by quick, measured sounds that resonated like distant piano keys echoing mournfully through the void. The melody beckoned, threaded with fear and longing. As I drew closer, I was drawn by a brilliant, flickering light diffusing from a room at the end of the hall, illuminating a delicate figure that swayed like a willow in autumn. I hesitated before crossing the threshold, the cold creeping sensation returning, a tactile warning resonating in the depths of my soul. This room, unlike the desolate ballroom, felt alive with a sorrowful energy. The walls were lined with mirrors, the surfaces reflecting glimmers of lives lived, lost, and forgotten. At the center, a woman with hollow cheeks swayed as if caught in eternal limbo, her dark dress rippling around her like the flowing tendrils of abyssal water. Her eyes, hollow and infinite, locked onto mine, and my heart ceased its rhythm. Do you hear the music? She whispered, her voice sagging under the weight of the unspeakable. They play for you. We all play for you. Who are you? I stammered, trapped between fear and intrigue. What do you want from me? The lost will always seek the living, she replied, her smile drifting into a heart-wrenching frown. But you are different. You can hear them, can't you? You understand their pain, their call. She gestured lightly, and in an instant, the reflective glass of the mirrors morphed into nightmarish visions, shadows of anguish and dread washing over me. I saw my family, screaming a cacophony of helpless cries, terror-laden faces twisting in pain. Help us! They roared, but the woman's chilling laughter pervaded the air, shattering the link between their pleas and my escaping heart. No, I shouted, clamping my hands over my ears, but the music grew louder, enveloping me in its symphony of madness. The woman approached, and with each step, I felt my own resolve wane, grounding me in the knowledge that there was nowhere to run. The shadows had rallied, welcoming me, drawing me closer to them. To join the dance, my dear. To be part of eternity in this wretched place. You need only to listen. Just as she reached for me, a blaring pulse surged, a deafening sound that brought forth the visions of a deep abyss. The ground trembled, and sudden darkness swallowed the light. I felt the walls closing in, the mirrors cracking, splintering before my eyes. The last glimpse I had was of her outstretched fingers, laughing as the shadows licked at my heels, and in the chaos, once again, I felt a familiar, desperate pull, a memory or desire to join those I had lost. And then, darkness enveloped me once more, drowning out the shouts, leaving behind only a whisper of my name, echoing in a chorus of torment. Help us come home. In that crushing moment, the air thinned. I sensed the fingers of the lost wrapped around me, dragging me back toward my family, back toward that stunningly deep chasm of despair, just as the echoing laughter combined with the pounding of my heart, resolving to a singular, dreadful truth. I might not be escaping. I might be the next player in their eternal dance. The oppressive darkness tightened around me like a serpent coiling its body, constricting the breath from my lungs. I had felt it before, the sinister whispers beckoning me to dive deeper into that nebulous void between the living and the lost. Yet each time, I fought back, grappling with the despair that oozed from the walls, from the souls trapped within. When my vision cleared, shapes emerged from the shadows. They flitted in and out of sight, their outlines distinct yet grotesquely human, faces twisted in horror, mouths moving in silent screams. Each of them seemed to implore me, their hollow eyes full of infinite sorrow. As I instinctively stepped back, the chill of dread wrapped around my spine, sending icy shivers cascading down through the marrow of my bones. That a rattle from behind startled me, and I turned sharply to see an antique mirror, which moments ago had been reflecting only darkness, now held a flicker of fragmented light. Harsh breaths echoed from its surface, the sound nearly inaudible, distorted, yet insistent. I moved closer, compelled, curiosity propelling me against caution. The face that emerged from the gloom was not my own. I gasped, stumbling backward. It was a child, grinning mischievously, with hollow eyes that looked straight through me. "You're supposed to see," it said, voice arid and cracked, as sharp as broken glass. I could almost taste its sorrow, bitter and sweet all at once. "We all want to play. Come and find us." The mirror rippled, and I caught fleeting glimpses, fingers clawing at the glass, a father figure wailing, a woman crumpled in despair, and the music, that infernal music, crackling beneath the surface. Each image merged and faded too quickly to grasp, yet the urgency was palpable, yearning for attention from a lost world. "No!" I shouted, backing away from the chilling reflection. The laughter of that woman echoed in my ears, tantalizing, enticing, drowning out my will. I felt my heart thudding wildly, an ill-timed drumbeat urging surrender. But I was not ready to submit. I had already lost too much. No, I screamed, turning away from the mirror just in time to be met by the threshold of another door. The handles twisted and contorted, and something shifted behind Ida, sorrowful moaning, thick with despair. Trembling, I reached for the rusted knob, each finger curling around it as if drawn by an unseen force. The door creaked open slowly, ushering forth a wind so rancid it nearly knocked me off my feet. The room exposed was a sanctuary of misery, walls lined with photographs, faces frozen in time, filled with joy, ignorance to the coming horrors. But the images twisted further, mouths screaming out in silence, eyes wide with knowing dread. And at the center stood a familiar figure, a child, hands pressed against the glass, face smeared with tears. "Help me!" It shrieked, over and over again, its voice raw, a haunting echo of familiar pain. My heart splintered with recognition. It was my own lost one, a fragment long consumed by despair. "Help us, please. You must find us." I could feel tears streaming down my face as I screamed, "I'm trying. He'll find you." My words hung heavy in the air, but the shadows began to swirl wildly, tendrils reaching out to drag me into the depths of my own sorrow. I was a mere puppet, caught in a web of grief, retreating backward toward a darkness far deeper than I could fathom. Suddenly, a strong push from behind sent me stumbling forward into the room. I was trapped among the cries of the forsaken, every plea resonating within me. The air plunged into suffocating silence, and with it, a buzzing sensation filled the room, humming in a dissonant tune that prickled the back of my mind. The photographs shivered, and a chorus of whispers beckoned me closer, brimming with an ominous promise that sent the deepest part of my soul into upheaval. "Find us, please find us," the voices chorused, overlapping like the notes of a sinister lullaby. Eyes darting around, I spotted a heavy velvet curtain at the far side, draped in sinister black, emitting an aura of deep, charcoal shadows. Compelled by something inside, I stepped forward with shaking hands and pulled the curtain aside. On the other side stood a dimly lit chamber, framed by monstrous shadows that twisted grotesquely. The air shimmered with energia, maelstrom of anger and pain, a chaotic tapestry of lost souls binding together with desperate threads. But there, framed in the faint light, was a group of figures, human, equally trapped. They turned towards me, and in the forefront stood my beloved family, eyes hollow and desperation palpable. "Help us," they cried, their voices merging into an agonizing harmony. "You must choose. Save us or save yourself." A sudden jolt of realization ripped through me as I felt the floor tremble beneath my feet, a dire warning resonating within. The shadows began to yawn, twisting and coiling to consume me entirely. "Join us in the dance," they called out, a siren's song merging with the cacophony of despair swirling around me. "It is time to play." And as the last light flickered, I knew that this horror was just beginning, that within the depths of their torment, a far darker truth awaited, one that would demand a choice heavier than death itself. In that instant, as the shadows enveloped me, I could see sparks of hope and despair swirling in a horrifying grotesque, and through the sweeping haze, a voice echoed clear and chilling. We are waiting, and the price for your freedom is far greater than you know. The chill sank deeper into my bones as the agonized faces of my family loomed before me, their hollow eyes reflecting a darkness that felt far too familiar. My heart raced not just from the terror of the unseen horrors lurking in the shadows, but from the terrifying possibility of what I might need to do. The air thickened as the whispers grew louder, intertwining with the cries of my loved ones. Join us, they sang, the absurd cheerfulness of their tone clashing horrifyingly with the despair etched across their features. You belong with us, forever. I staggered back, the weight of their gaze suffocating. No, this isn't what I wanted. I can't. My voice cracked as I turned to escape, but was met with a solid wall of darkness pressing in from every angle, a void that seemed sentient, alive. The shadows pulsated, pulling me back towards my family, back into the horrors they represented. Suddenly, from within the yawning abyss, I caught sight of something slithering, a glistening tendril, slick and glistening like oil under the dim light. It coiled around my ankle, shooting icy spikes of dread through me, and I stumbled, falling to the ground. My thoughts raced. This was an illusion, a trick of the dark. But as I pulled myself to my feet in a desperate attempt to shake free, the tendril tightened, filling me with an overwhelming sense of despair. Make your choice, they chorused again, an echoing mockery of a plea. It's time to choose who will live and who will vanish. Bounding upright, I frantically searched for an exit, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, my heart pounding in my ears so violently it nearly drowned out the whispers. But the room had shifted. It was an ever-expanding labyrinth, the walls closing in as if they were alive, shifting and writhing with unseen energy. Hurry! The voices intensified, a mixture of fear and urgency plucking at my every nerve. Choose. Save us now before it's too late. Just as I relinquished hope and let despair wash over me, a shimmer caught my eye, a translucent door, flickering like a candle flame, wavering on the edge of existence. It stood at the far side of the room, a beacon promising salvation and yet exuding dread. It called to me, and I began to move, ripping my eyes away from the haunting faces claiming my soul. The tendril still coiled around me, pulling with a force that felt unnatural. I struggled against it, writhing as the shadows loomed closer, their presence suffocating. If only I could just grasp the handle and pull the door open, perhaps I could escape. But each step felt leaden, weighted by an unseen force, as if the room wanted to keep me contained in this nightmare. Don't leave us, my family cried, their voices blending into a chilling cacophony. You promised to save us. Choose now. I reached the door, fingers trembling as I grasped the handle, the metal cool against my fevered skin. But in that instant, a flash of my daughter's face, joyful and innocent, invaded my mind. I hesitated, doubt clawing at my sanity. If I opened the door, would I truly leave them behind? What if they were lost for eternity because of my selfishness? Help us, they cried, and I could feel their desperation clawing at my heart. Just then, the tendril gave one savage tug, yanking me backward, dragging me away from hope, away from salvation. I gasped, slamming my hand into the door frame, a desperate attempt to hold on. But then the shadows morphed, coalescing into a grotesque figureous silhouette with elongated limbs and a gaping mouth filled with jagged teeth, twisted like a maw born of nightmares. It emerged slowly, crawling forward, whispering promises laced with malice, its eyes gleaming with hunger. Join us, or suffer. The choice was no longer mine to make. The grotesque figure struck with unpredictable speed, its long fingers stretching towards me, pulling at my sanity. My family's pleas morphed into distorted wails, echoing endlessly. As the darkness threatened to consume me completely, I clung to the fleeting thought of escape, screaming, I will find a way. I flung myself towards the luminous door, feeling the icy grip of the world behind me receding. But just as I reached for the handle, a violent surge of energy blasted through the air, causing everything to shatter into fragments. Light erupted around me in chaotic bursts. And in that chaos, the shadows screamed out one final warning, drowning my thoughts in a tide of terror. Seek us in the dark, for we are never truly gone. And then, with a blinding spark, the world around me imploded into darkness. All that remained was the echo of my own heartbeat pulsing slowly against the deafening silence, as I felt the tendril tightening once more, pulling me toward the beckoning shadows. Something whispered in the dark, "You will be one of us suddenly." The void shifted, revealing illuminated shapes flickering at the edge of my consciousness. I wasn't alone, I didn't want to be. But as my vision cleared, I realized I was surrounded by eyes hollow, hungry eyes blending into one shadowy tapestry, each one more terrible than the last. None of them were my family. And as the oppressive warmth of despair wrapped around me, I knew the real horror was yet to come. With desperate urgency, the figures outside the darkness murmured, "You have one chance left, will you take it?" But the door had vanished, leaving me with the haunting question, what would you sacrifice? The darkness pressed against my skin like a suffocating shroud. I could feel the presence of the shadowy figures closing in on me, their whispers curling into my ears like smoke, wrapping tight around my mind. One chance, they cooed in unison, a haunting chant that echoed into the corners of my awareness. One chance to escape the fate you fear, but escape to where? The void held no promises, only the relentless squeeze of despair and uncertainty. I was trapped in a liminal space between realms, between this world and whatever lay beyond, where my family's faces had morphed into that grotesque creature. Their essence swirled around me, pulling at my spirit. A sudden chill darted through the air, slicing through the heat of despair. I shuddered as the sensation clawed at the nape of my neck, a whisper of cold breath tickling my skin. "Seek us in the dark," the words echoed, reverberating through the twisted abyss that encased me. As my resolve began to falter, a soft glow flickered in my peripheral vision, a faint shimmer that pierced through the oppressive blanket of dread. My heart leaped. Was it another door? Another way out? I turned toward it, instinctively thinking it was a lifeline, some form of salvation amidst the madness. But as I drew closer, the glow transformed, revealing itself as an ethereal figure, translucent and shimmering like a mirage. The entity hovered just out of reach, its ethereal face sending chills through my bones. It resembled my daughter, her features hauntingly familiar, yet twisted in an expression of caution and dread. "Daddy," it whispered softly, the sound dragging like a nail across an ancient chalkboard. "You mustn't." That I reached for her, longing to pull her from the shadows. But the moment my fingers brushed against the luminous figure, it dissipated like mist in sunlight. "Wait, come back," I screamed, desperation shredding my voice. But instead of a response, a cascade of laughter erupted around me, sharp and mocking, echoing off unseen walls. "You can't save her," they sang, the voices melding into a cacophony that twisted my stomach into knots. "She belongs to us now." "They all do." As if on cue, the shadows surged forward, and I stumbled back, feeling the cold, clammy grasp of the tendrils still clutching my ankle. I fought against it, but the creeping tendrils from the darkness seemed to coalesce, creating a web that laced through my very being. "Your fear feeds us," the growing sounds taunted, their sinister joy lifting them higher, enveloping me in waves of terror. "Your heart is not your own anymore. You've already chosen." A distorted laugh echoed, reminiscent of my daughter's giggle, snapping through the blackness. "Join us, dear father. We are free here. You don't understand." But I did understand. The chilling realization sank into my chest like a dagger. This was their truth. Once you entered the realm of darkness, there was no way back. Shadows thrived on the energy of the living, luring them with promises of reunion and safety, only to trap their essence under a mantle of despair. "No!" I screamed, panic exploding inside me as memories of my family assaulted me. Warm hugs, shared laughter, bedtime stories wrapped in love. "You aren't them. You're not my family." Suddenly, I felt the tendril flicker, loosening its grip, and I seized the moment. Drawing on every last ounce of strength, I lunged into the depths of the glimmering chaos. Perhaps I could defy the darkness. Perhaps there was a way to fight against what they wanted me to become. But just as I plunged headfirst into the shimmering light, the shadows recoiled, twisting and writhing like wounded serpents. Their anguish morphed into rage, and the grotesque figure reappeared at the forefront, elongated limbs stretching and contorting, its gaping mouth widening in a grin that threatened to swallow the very universe. "Fool!" it bellowed, the voice a wretched chorus of every fear I ever hid. "You were never supposed to escape. You chose this, and now you will pay the price." The air thickened with malevolence as the shadows coalesced into an inky wave, crashing down upon me. With a force that felt insurmountable, drowning me in nightmarish visions of my family's faces warping into terror and to despair. The pressure mounted like a vice, and I felt myself unravel, fading into their cacophony. Suddenly, I was pulled back into the void, tumbling through the darkness as the figures shrieked in a frenzy, their eyes flickering and darting, desperate to consume what remained of my soul. But even through the chaos, a desperate thought ignited in me. The mirror. I recalled the old stories about the cursed mirror in my family's home, the one said to reveal hidden truths. Perhaps it was a reflection of hope rather than horror. I could still reach it if I only believed hard enough. But just as my resolve steadied, I felt the tendril lunging once more, striking deep into my core. I gasped as it twisted painfully, dragging me down and swirling me further into oblivion. And all at once, just as I lost my footing in the darkness, I felt a sharp jolt, a moment of clarity. In that blinding flash, I realized that the eyes surrounding me were not merely watching, they were waiting. Each pair glimmered with anticipation, hungry for my choice, the choice that could bind my soul to theirs. "Will you surrender?" they whispered, the shadows converging, and in that instant, everything snapped taut. I was on the precipice of a decision that would forever alter my fate. In the pitch of the void, with their cruel laughter ringing through my ears, I screamed into the abyss, "Will I choose the darkness, or will I choose the fight?" But then the flickering light dimmed, leaving nothing but the suffocating grip of despair, and the last thing I heard was the laughter echoing around me, a promise that even if I chose to fight, the darkness would never truly let me go. As I felt myself being pulled back into the suffocating embrace of the shadows, the final threat sliced through the air. "You won't just join us, you'll become us." And just like that, the last remnants of hope flickered and died, leaving behind a chilling realization that the real horror was waiting on the other side. A haunting silence enveloped me, a fidelity of emptiness that draped like a funeral shroud over everything I once clung to. The laughter, once sharp and taunting, dimmed into a dreadful hum, then faded to an eerie stillness. I could almost hear the beating of my own heart, each thump echoing in a world that felt impossibly distant. "Did I ask this it?" I muttered, my voice trembling in a darkness that felt like a weight pressing down, suffocating. "Have they consumed me?" Suddenly, the air shifted, a shivering breeze slipped through the void, wrapping around my body, as if guiding me away from the encroaching shadow. In that moment of chilling clarity, I understood that the darkness craved my fear, a malignant life force feeding upon the very essence of my dread. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the emptiness, a visceral sound summoned from some grotesque throat far beyond my reality, sending shivers coursing through my spine. Then, without warning, shapes began to emerge from the thick blackness, figures shimmering like oil on water, grotesque and mocking, their impressions flickering like candle flames in a storm. "No," I gasped, scrabbling backward, but the shadows surged forward, undulating towards me like waves on a tumultuous sea. They twisted into forms that bore grotesque semblances to those I loved, faces contorted with malevolence, lips curving into cruel grins. I clenched my jaw, prepared to fight against the familiar essence twisted by the dark. "You can't have me." But they only laughed, a cacophony of voices, each echoing with a memory I desperately wished to forget. "Come join us, sweet father," they purred, their tones mocking yet hypnotic. "It's easy." Just let go. I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to fall back into their fervent grasp. In a moment of overwhelming instinct, I retched backward, feeling the shadowy tendrils retract, a brief reprieve that fueled my determination. It was then that I could feel a gentle lull of a memory curling around me, the faint recollection of rain pattering on roof tiles, of warm nights spent gathered close with laughter and song. That pulse of warmth was everything. It anchored me like roots once buried deep in the earth, and I clung to it fiercely as the shadows slashed at it with angry tendrils. "Come," they hissed, the voices swirling into a whirlwind around me, heavy with anger and desperation. You think you can change this? We will drag you back, Father. We are all you have left, No. I roared, pushing back against the fog, feeling my strength swell like tides crashing against a rocky shore. I wasn't ready to let go. Not now. As the din grew louder, beyond comprehension, a crack of light sliced through the hazet, narrow beam piercing the black, illuminating the contours of the swirling despair. I turned toward it, struggling against the grasp of shadows that clawed at my ankles, tugging me deeper into the abyss. That sliver of light was unlike anything I'd experienced. It felt warm and alive, as if a hand reached out, promising protection. Help me. I screamed into the brightness, but my voice became little more than an echo as the darkness surged forward once more, recapturing me in its relentless grasp. Then, with a wicked precision, the shadowy figure I had encountered before solidified before me in its grotesque state, its maw stretching to smile a perverse invitation. You felt our touch. Do you want to know what lies beyond? It leaned closer, its breath cold and stale, suffocating. You've already chosen to fight the inevitable. Now you will see what happens to those who resist. I in the throes of panic. I recognized the mirrored terror reflected in its Aisa binding between my fear and its glee. I lunged for the light once more, making a desperate grab for salvation. But the remaining shadows wrapped tighter around me, seeping into my skin, racing through my veins like venom that I felt them pour into my mind, unleashing visions of my family caught in an endless cycle of darkness, teetering on the edge of despair, eternally lost. And then, as a terrible realization crashed over me like icy water, the figures twisted my family's faces into a grinning mask of twisted joy, whispering secrets of the end of never-ending darkness and shadows quenching the light forever, No. I cried, as the darkness squeezed tighter and I was thrust backward, feet slipping. The walls of my reality began to blur and spin, dissolving into an infinite void. The growl returned, and it filled me with terror, an echo that wasn't merely sound but a dreadful presence creeping under my skin, infecting my thoughts. Suddenly, like thunder cracking through a storm, a painful jolt surged through me. The mirror. It had to be nearby. With steely resolve, I forced myself to break free from the shadows wrapping around my throat and lunged towards the light once more, the dreams of my family guiding me, a heartbeat pulsing against the encroaching darkness. Yet, just as I broke through the veil towards the light's embrace, the shadows surged, a roaring wave clamping down on my shoulders, compressing, squeezing, tearing at my very essence. Even the hope of salvation is a trap, it hissed, the voice a guttural cacophony. You still think you can escape the truth? You will meet the inevitable soon enough? I felt the tether of reality slipping fast, my heart pounding against my ribs, pulse racing in a frenzy as I fought against everything that threatened to consume me. And then I saw the mirror, looming before me, shimmering with every haunting memory I had ever tried to forget. It reflected not only my face but the shapes of my family behind me, their eyes wide with torment, mouths moving in a scream that cut into the silence. In that moment, I realized it was never just about the darkness. It was about understanding the choices I had made, the horrid price of defiance echoing back to me. As I reached for it, the slap of something cold and earthy wrapped around my legs like an anchor, dragging me back, pulling me into that suffocating embrace. Join us, the shadows roared, their desperate laughter surging forth. You are ours. And just as the mirror shattered, I felt the darkness rip into my spirit, an icy truth whispering in my ear. You will become one of us, and then we will take the light. Everything erupted into chaos, agony twisting through me until it all spiraled into a thunderous crash of silence. And as I lay lost in the disorienting darkness, all too aware that the true horror yet awaited, I felt myself slipping away, surrendering to the void that craved my very soul. But as the shadows drew closer, I heard an unexpected voice, a soft chirp breaking through my despair, a melody I swore I recognized. Daddy. It sang, sweet and innocent, reverberating through the night. But when I turned, all I saw was the darkness grinning back at me, and in that relentless night, I realized the true horror that awaited was yet to be unearthed. The voice echoed again, piercing through the heavy silence. And in that moment of dread, the darkness around me pulsed like a living organism, writhing and twisting in anticipation. Daddy! The word rang like a melancholy bell, sending chills rattling down my spine that I forced my eyes open, desperate to catch a glimpse of the source. But all I saw were countless eyes, reflecting nothing more than endless shadows. The darkness thickened, swirling with discontent as if sensing my distraction, its grip tightening around my throat like a vice. "Stay with us," the shadows hissed, their cruel mirth surrounding me like an oppressive fog. Yet beneath it lingered that sweet voice, so simple, so familiar. "Little one?" I rasped, my voice barely a whisper, torn between hope and despair. Was it truly her? My daughter? The thought drove a shard of icy terror into my heart. What sinister trickery was playing out before me? "Where are you?" As if answering my call, the shadows parted, unveiling a scene marred with despair. A familiar room flickered into view, the dim glow of a nightlight illuminating the scattered toys, pillows haphazardly strewn around, as if a battle had taken place. But it was the figure standing in the center that stole my breath away. There she was, my daughter, her face illuminated by the pale orb of the nightlight. But the expression on her face was one of confusion and sorrow. The innocence of her smile faded, replaced by the hollow gaze of something unnameable. "Daddy," she cried again, voice strained and choked, edged by a desperation that chilled me. "Don't you see?" The shadows loomed closer, cascading around me, caressing my skin with an eldritch coolness. "She belongs with us now. No." The words shouted from some deep well springing in my chest, and I felt a surge of energy clawing through my limbs. "You can't take her. She's not yours. Not yet," the shadows retorted, their collective voice as distorted as a howl through a wire fence. "But she will soon understand. Just like you." In that harrowing moment of realization, my heart sank. The darkness wasn't just trying to claim me, it wanted my daughter too. I could feel a yearning within the gloom, a desire to bring her deeper, ensnare her in their web of despair. "Run!" I shouted, but my voice faltered as the figures morphed around me, their features sharpening into grotesque masks of my loved ones. "Get away from her!" But the shadows wrapped tighter around my torment, the shape of my daughter now stretching and twisting, her face morphing further into something misshapen and sad. The room flickered, distorted by the caustic energy of the dark presence. I felt the tides of sorrow pulling at my heart. Suddenly, the darkness jabbed a sharp tendril into the ground, and the floor beneath my feet cracked wide open, revealing an endless chasm swirling with a darkness darker than night itself. I instinctively reached toward my daughter, fighting against the torrent that sought to pull me down. "Daddy," she chorused, her voice soaked in fear, hands reaching out toward me. Trembling that I stepped forward, my heart racing. But just as I was about to touch her hand, the shadows lunged for the wave of angry darkness crashing against me with a primal fury. "Do you really think you can save her?" they jeered, voices creeping under my skin, tightening their malignant grip. "You cannot even save yourself." Everything around me faded in and out of focus, the last vestiges of my daughter's face twisting into a sickening smile, and with it, my hope fractured further. The chasm widened, ready to swallow us whole. Just as I grasped for her hand, a bone-chilling scream erupted from the darkness, reverberating off the walls, shaking the very essence of the ground. The walls of the house began to shift violently, cracking and crumbling under the weight of the supernatural forces ravaging us. In that harrowing moment of clarity, I realized the true horror resonating through the darkness. It was asking me to choose, to save myself, or to relinquish my soul to protect the once warm heart that filled my home. "That I will not let you take her," I roared, adrenaline surging through me as I braced against the tide. But the shadows responded with a chilling chorus of laughter, swirling faster, the chasm tugging at my feet, bringing the shattered remains of the world crashing down. And just as I felt the final pull dragging me toward that abyss, the last wisp of light flickered on the verge of extinguishing. Suddenly, a tiny, flickering flame ignited in my hand, the warmth pulsing against the frigid void. "Find the mirror." The flame whispered, the voice barely audible over the chaos, like a spark thriving amidst the growing darkness. "Find the way back." With a desperate lunge, I thrust my hand forward, the flame illuminating the shape of my daughter for a fleeting second. "I'm coming," I called, the determination flooding my voice, but the shadows lashed out, shrieking in a frenzy, stifling my resolve. It all spiraled into a cacophony of screams, and I found myself teetering at the brink, the edge of the darkness whispering promises of oblivion, ready to claim my very soul just as hope glimmered before me. "Daddy," came her melodic yet haunting cry, and just as the light flickered in my palm, the world around us began to stretch and fracture further. I reached out for her, my heart racing, reading the insidious whispers of the darkness threatening to extinguish my last flicker of hope. The moment felt suspended in terror, and as I wavered, the light began to pulse a war between the consuming shadows and the desperate flame drawn from the depths of my heart. But as I stared into my daughter's pleading eyes, flashes of joy, love, and innocence turning into a reflection of pure emptiness, I realized that the choice was not solely mine to make. And as I trembled on the precipice between hope and despair, the murmur of the dark unveiled a shocking truth that spiraled my reality again. "You will take her place." In that instant, amid the throes of chaos, the darkness began to withdraw, lingering behind, waiting for the conclusion, for my answer lingered hanging heavy in the air, its chilling grip tightening around my very soul. And in that agonizing silence, the lingering question whispered through the darkness. Could I truly save her before the shadows claimed both our souls? I was suspended in a universe of shadows, where the echoes of despair clung like cobwebs, wrapping around me tightly. The cries of my daughter reverberated through the darkness, each syllable pulling at the very fibers of my soul, urging me to reach higher, to fight for her salvation. "Daddy, please." Their voices came at me, mocking, sinister, sneering as though they were performing a macabre dance. "Join us forever or lose her. What is your choice?" Their laughter echoed, split and merged into one cacophony of torment, hollow and insatiably a promise wrapped in a curse. The shadows writhed around me like living smoke, hungry for despair. Yet beneath their clutches, I felt a flicker of warmth in my palm. The small flame grew, a beacon against the encroaching void. "Find the mirror." It was the whispered command of something greater, something that transcended this darkness. My heart surged with hope, a desperate ember casting aside the shadows. Summoning strength from the depths of my being, I surged toward the flickering light that had become my lifeline, the promise of a salvation I had almost forgotten. "Enough?" I roared defiantly, my voice a growl against the tide of darkness. The shadows thrashed, lashing out with anger, but fueled by rage and love, I pressed onward, forcing my way through the tumult, eyes locked on that radiant glimmer. Hope pushed against despair, a visceral pool of energy igniting every fiber of my being. And then, I saw the mirror. It hung suspended in the chaos, a shimmering gateway dividing worlds, a portal promising either salvation or despair. My heart hammered. I could hear the furious whispers circling me like vultures, their intentions grimly tainted. "You don't belong there, foolish father." But I did. The realization washed over Mimi's spirit resided not in shadows, but in light. I sprinted toward the mirror, the tendrils of darkness clawing at me, shrieking, the thunder of their voices clawing at my sanity. "She's ours. You'll never leave, Daddy." Her voice cut through like a knife, and with one final heave, I leapt toward the mirror, some unseen barrier blazing before me. Time warped as the glass shimmered like the surface of a lake disturbed by a stone, and for an agonizing second, I felt as if I were being ripped apart. But then I broke through. Light exploded around me, bathing me in warmth. I staggered forward, breathless, gasping as the darkness recoiled, retreating with furious wails, voices fading, until only distance remained. And yet amid the brilliance, I felt a tug at my heart, turning cold as dread washed over me. The room solidified around me. It was my home but different. My daughter stood before the mirror, her figure distorted, reflected in flickering waves of light, her terrified eyes glistening, reflecting my horror. I reached out, fingers trembling. "Sweetheart." But she didn't respond as I desperately sought to close the distance. The air thickened, shadows breathing down my neck. Those horrible, Familiar ones formed grotesque reminders of despair and heartache. From the mirror's surface, echoes of screams morphed into laughter, intertwining like a sinister dance, pushing me into the depths of despair. Daddy, her voice was a whisper, laced with uncertainty, blending with the darkness swirling around the edges of the room, a cruel reminder of how close she hovered to the abyss. "Don't worry. I'm here. I will save you," I cried. But the laughter surged louder, a sinister symphony consuming the room. The darkness danced at the edges of my vision, threatening to reclaim me and the warmth I had revived. "Join us," the shadows hissed, shifting toward my daughter, their faces mocking me with twisted smiles, eyes wide and gleaming as though anticipating my eventual surrender. "You can't save her. You can't even save yourself." But the flame in my heart ignited brighter, a beacon against their twisted truths. "No," I shouted defiantly, thrusting my hand through the mirror once more. As I plunged toward my daughter, two glaring forms appeared, twisting into place behind her. They were the representations of my insecurities and failures, monstrous, grotesque, feeding off my sorrow. "Isn't this what brought you back?" they taunted. "The wounds of loss, the grief unending?" The terrible memories surged through me in a wave of anguish. "Will you sacrifice your soul for her, Father? Or will you leave her behind, Daddy?" Her voice pealed through the overwhelming noise, and in that moment, clarity struck. I was losing her, and maybe this time, they were right. I could choose account for the shadows lurking within. I realized that to save my daughter, I had to face the darkness, not flee. It was time to confront my fears. As the shadows writhed and transformed, my hand recoiled from the mirror, a wave of understanding striking through the chaos. "You're a part of me," I whispered to the shadows, feeling their weight, their despair. "And I accept that. But you will not claim my daughter." With that declaration, the shadows shivered, recoiling as if struck. The mirror shimmered again, and within its depths, I saw layers of visions, glimpses of love, laughter, heartache, everything that shaped me. I felt the ties of my heart to my daughter, memories washing over me, memories I wouldn't forsake. "Release her," I shouted, feeling a surge pulse through me. The room erupted, light cascading with each phrase. "You have no hold over us." The figures spiraled, howling with rage, but the flame in my heart erupted into a blaze, hope, love, and resolve slashing through their darkness. Then came the moment of truth. I lunged forward toward the mirror and yanked my daughter from its depths, pulling her against me as shadows screamed, fading into the ether, their laughter twisting into anguished cries of defeat. We tumbled backward, landing safely in our room, warmth surrounding us not just from the light, but from our connection. But then, a chilling realization gripped me. I turned my head, only to see not shadows, but echoes of loss lingering at the edges. The darkness hung back, murmuring of vengeance, of waiting. "You may have escaped for now," a low voice echoed, deep and ominous, reverberating like thunder. "But we are never truly gone." And in that haunting moment, I knew the truth. The darkness would always linger, waiting for the next flicker of weakness, the cracks in my resolve. The horrors might have been kept at bay, but remnants remained, indelible scars I would forever bear, and the shadows would whisper always. Until next time, we will be waiting.